I'm going to shut up now. Talk to me about shame.
Shame is what keeps us stuck. And first of all, what I'd like to say to anybody who was in my position, who just couldn't figure out why the hell can't I stop this? What is wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. Your body is working as designed. You're not broken. You're not powerless. You just need skills.
Welcome to the Prime Life Project podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to an episode of the Prime Life Project podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to the show Lily Weis. How are we?
Oh, so excited to be here. So excited to be here this morning. Thank you.
Honestly, very excited to talking to you today because we're talking about a topic. Last time we spoke to you off air about this. We've had someone on the podcast before talking about Alcoholics Anonymous and how they sort of hit rock bottom. But we're sort of going at a different angle today. So we're actually talking about alcohol use disorder, which is very, very different to being a kind of alcoholic, like on the far spectrum that most people kind of associate with. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we go into it, I want to sort of deep dive into yourself and kind of what your story is. So I'm very excited to hear about this. So can you sort of paint a picture for my audience about how you got into this space? Like what led you to be talking about this? Like why is this such a passion for you?
Well, it's the story of a woman of a certain age who found herself, instead of living the adventurous life that I'd always lived before, like so many people, probably everyone listening, we have these great plans for our life. And I was always very adventurous. I've done some crazy stuff. And I found myself in my middle 50s, sitting in my living room, drinking a bottle of wine a night in this very lovely chair, watching Netflix and thinking if I didn't drink, I would never have fun again. And then occurring to me, this is not fun. Like, what happened? And so what happened is alcohol use disorder. And oh my gosh, the things I wish I knew. So it's super important to me that when I talk about this stuff, that you and everyone listening understands that there is never any judgment for me here. This is just all about where I'm coming from. And I'm just going to lay the facts on you and you can make your own choices. Mm-hmm. So there I was, presumably from the outside, a very healthy person in a very, loving, high functioning relationship, always had great jobs, always been very healthy. I have a running coach, mm-hmm. I ran a marathon at 50 and I think I drank the night before. So this was just my life. And so I wasn't one of those people that was, hit rock bottom, which is a really big misconception about alcohol use disorder. What we'd like to believe is alcohol there. So it's a spectrum of very mild to the top 10% are severe. Mm-hmm. And I think that's who you were talking about earlier. The people who are physically addicted that need medical help to detox, or it's very dangerous. Mm-hmm. That's about 10% of the population. The rest of us, the 90%, are on this spectrum. And I was somewhere in the middle, right? Like I wasn't going to get the DTs if I quit, but I really believed I wouldn't have fun anymore. Like, how did that happen? How did alcohol become the only thing that made my life fun? Mm. And so I just knew this is too much. I'm drinking too much. And I have always been super disciplined. Anything I put my mind to, it's like, boom, done, no problem. Went to quit, boom, glass of wine back in my hand. Went to quit again, boom, glass of wine back in my hand again. And I think this is probably resonating with anyone who did dry January. Mm. There's about 25% of the population who did that, who either didn't make it through the whole month or spent the month saying, I cannot wait until February 1st. I cannot wait. I can make it, but this is really, really hard. So in my search to find a solution for myself, there was just no way I was going to AA, because first of all, I wasn't going to stand up and say I was powerless, because that isn't true. And it just seems so miserable. Like, this is it. This is the rest of my life. I'm going to be using willpower and be miserable and never have fun again. I really thought those were my choices, that I could take care of my body and figure out a way to stop drinking, or I would just keep drinking.
So when you say, I think it's really interesting how we said about you tried to stop, and then there was a glass of wine in your hand. Like, how long was it were you actually stopping for? Was we talking about months here? We talking about 6 months, couple of weeks, couple of days? Like, how long would it be between the sort of, I say relapses, but between you saying you were going to quit and then having it there again?
Right? It was a 6-year period. And I did the math. Now, this isn't exact, but I believe it's 1,851 times. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, what have I done? Just that wash of shame. Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get this? Maybe I do need AA. Maybe I do need rehab. And then in the morning you say, okay, I got this. Today, I'm not going to drink. And then at 5 o'clock at night, I would have that glass of wine in my hand again.
So why do you think that is? Because you're not alone. As you said, a lot of people can relate to this. There's so many things I've already wrote down we're going to link back to when it comes to shame, the feeling, powerless, other misconceptions. There's loads we're going to dive into. But I just want to know, like, why do you think that is? Like, because so many people can relate to what you said there, where they make a promise to themselves. And again, this is not just when it comes to alcohol. Like, people do this all the time. And my biggest thing is that I think a lot of people nowadays struggle with, people talk about self-confidence, self-respect, self-esteem. Well, what is self-confidence and what is self-esteem? It's esteem of self. It's confidence in yourself. But if you keep making promises to yourself and then breaking them, you are lying to yourself constantly. So is it any wonder why you have no self-esteem and it's self-confidence? Because you don't have confidence in yourself to stick to your word. If you can't stick to your word, like, what makes you think that you can help anyone else and all this stuff? So that's why I think a lot of people are struggling for that exact reason, where, oh, I'm done. I promise never gonna drink again. Bam, there we go. So why do you think you were stuck in that loop?
I'm going to answer in two areas. One is the physical area. I hope everybody's sitting down for this. The human body is designed to become addicted. It's dopamine. That's that neurotransmitter. We used to think it was the neurotransmitter of pleasure. It's actually the neurotransmitter of more. And it's how we got here. It's how we survived. Because if we were out foraging and we ate something delicious that didn't kill us, we would get a dopamine hit. And then that would teach us this is good to eat. And so we do more. So our system is designed to work off of this dopamine. What happens when you take something like alcohol is it is giving you a giant dopamine hit, way bigger than what we're designed to handle. And so what happens is you get this giant dopamine hit and your brain just goes, whoa, this is the best thing ever. And it's so overexcited. And then it panics and it says, uh-oh, I'm out of balance. This is too much. I got to start dumping some neurotransmitters and some chemicals in here to calm this down. And so you get that big high. And then what happens is you get this, like, you get 20 minutes of the high, and then you get about 3 hours of this low, because it's dumping cortisol, adrenaline, dynorphin, all kinds of things in you that make you not feel good. Well, that design is what niggles you to want the dopamine again. So that is our body. That's the loop. Because if it was just raspberries and you're trying to survive, it's niggling you for a little raspberry. But instead, because we have porn and gambling and video games and sugar and everything, all these things do the same thing to the brain. It's creating this circle. And so from a physiological perspective, what's going on is my body had the alcohol, gave me a big hit, then it dropped me low, and now it's saying, oh, I want that hit again. So that is what we're dealing with from a psychological perspective.
I just want to jump back on this because I know what my brain's like, and I've already written notes on this. I want to dive into this, and then we'll go back to the second part, because I just want to make sure I'm dissecting this, because you've said so much gold here. I just want to make sure that I'm really unpicking this for my audience. So my understanding of this is you're having the alcohol, and then you basically get this massive high for 20 minutes. My question is, if I have a second drink in that time, does it then compound? So, for example, if I've had 6 or 7 drinks deep, does that mean that the high lasts for maybe a couple of hours before I get the crash? Is that kind of why we seek more? Because I'm just thinking in my head, like, you see people, and they maybe have one drink, it takes them about 20 minutes, and then have the second drink. So they never really get that downward trough, really. It's only when they stop. So like on a night out, people are kind of going for hours and they're living on that high. So does it kind of compound over time? And then when the night's over, they also get a compounding dump as well at the end? Is that kind of how it works? I'm not quite sure.
That's close. It's like a squiggle. You never get as high as that first high. In fact, you're never feeling as good as when you've just ordered the drink, because you get a dopamine hit at that moment. Is it
the anticipation of it? So I've heard something before. I think it's Andrew Huberman talks about it with the dopamine, and actually you get more of a response in anticipation of the thing. So like, for example, before you go to have sex, it's actually the anticipation of having sex rather than the actual act of sex gives you more dopamine. And it's the anticipation of having the food. You enjoy it more before you actually have the thing. So the same thing. So when you're waiting at the bar to order, is that when so that's what you're saying, that that's the peak, and then you have the drink and it's downhill?
Yeah. So for people who are wondering about this, as a little thought experiment, next time you go out and order, or as you're reaching for the glass in your cabinet, pay attention to how you're feeling. And you're going to find that once you're coming to the resolution, it's coming. Like you're very agitated before your wait person takes your order, right? You're sitting there and you're like, oh, when are they coming? When are they coming? And once they come and get that order, you go, oh, this is good. But what happens with the waves is it's a series of ups and downs. What you're taking your body through is just a roller coaster. But it never gets up as high, because it taxes you. I call it like borrowing joy from a loan shark. It's charging exorbitant interest with each drink. So you get the 20 minutes high, 3 hours of low, you get another 20-minute high, but the 3 hours of low is on top of that. So you can see how that's conking it out. And at the end of the night, what you're stuck with is hours and hours of leftover, not feel good chemicals. You're dealing with the body detoxifying, because it literally it's the chemical you're putting into you. Ethanol is the exact same chemical that you put in your car. You could fact check me out there. Everybody go look that up.
Listen, I say this to people all the time. I don't drink alcohol. I've not drank alcohol for a while. It is a poison. It is a literal poison. And I say to people, if I had a glass of poison right now and told you to drink it, would you drink it? The answer is no. And this thing, I don't care if people drink. I don't judge. I don't care if people, I am not bothered what people do. My thing is, people aren't informed and they don't make an informed choice. They think they know, but they don't actually know. And that for me is the thing, especially when it comes to, I've heard you mention this before, when it comes into education at school and all that sort of stuff. The problem is for me with alcohol is that it seemed to be cool. The whole thing about it is glamorous. You got in America, you got the Bud Light girls, whatever they are. It's just, the whole thing's just glamorous. It's amazing. The whole thing is, you got all the celebrities doing it. And for me, it's just like no one actually talks about the dopamine. No one talks about the after effects and chemically what it does to your body. Like, it's a depressant. Like, we're wondering now, we've got a mental health crisis, and again, America and UK as well, worldwide. Yet most people are using alcohol to, again, relax after work, to numb the pain, to escape reality, whatever it is, not realizing the thing they're using to escape reality is actually making their reality worse. They don't seem to correlate the two together.
Yes, because it's just too far apart, right? It's just too far apart. So we're not putting that together. That the thing with our bodies is, and goes back to Pavlov, when, they put the food out and, the bell rings, they put the food out, the dogs salivate, and it stops right there. They're not, something that happened 4 hours ago, 5 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right. So you're putting this poison in you, and it is, your whole body stops doing everything. It turns, I can give you the fancy names. The alcohol goes in, your body can't do anything with it. It turns into an even worse poison. And it's that worse poison that gives you the high. That's actually, you've actually poisoned yourself. And that's where you're feeling that buzz. And everybody, another thought experiment, you'll notice you never get that buzz on the second drink. You feel drunk, but the buzz is only that first drink. And you're just
while the poison goes in.
You're just chasing that for the rest of the night. And as you're an athlete, you may find this interesting. When I say that the body stops everything to get rid of the alcohol, there was a study done in Australia, I believe, with the soccer players. The rest of the world calls them football players.
Yep.
But not American.
No.
The soccer players, and they gave them the big workout, and then they gave different athletes different things: alcohol with protein and carbohydrates. The athletes that got any alcohol recovered 40% more slowly than the athletes without it. And they did this with muscle biopsies. So it was a very
in detail
scientific method. Very scientific method. So your body literally stops everything to get this alcohol out.
And the thing for me is as well, it's not that it stops everything while you're doing it. It also shuts down a lot of your senses. I think this is the second part, like your brain. Like when you're actually having alcohol, like you make silly decisions. You're not thinking straight. You're not behaving like yourself. So not only is it affecting you from a physical point of view, but actually mentally as well. Like it's completely messing up there as well.
Yes, and the dementia is the one that scares me. My mother is in the hardest stages of dementia right now, where she knows she doesn't know, and it's just gut-wrenching. And alcohol and dementia are very highly linked. And people are thinking, oh, that's for the people who are in that 10% Lily was talking about. But no, that's for anyone. Like, I'm talking about people who are drinking a glass of wine a night. Your risk for dementia goes way up. Why is
that?
Alcohol is fascinating in that because it is both water and fat soluble, it gets into everything into our bodies. So it's leaking into our brains as much as it's leaking into our guts, our bloodstream, everything, everywhere. And it's damaging everything as it goes.
Well, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense to me. Again, so I've never really linked it to the cancer side of stuff or the dementia, but it makes perfect sense to me. So you've got something that is literally a poison, and it can cross the blood-brain barrier, so it affects your brain. People know it affects your brain. And again, people can say it doesn't. It does, because clearly you know what it's like to be drunk. It affects your brain. And then you're then also saying that it affects every other cell within the body. So if you take something poisonous, and again, just put it somewhere and you see it spread, like mold, for example, you get a bit of moldy fruit, put it in a fruit bowl, you see it spread everywhere. You can see the impact that has. So it makes perfect sense to me that it's correlated. Now, this is something that for me is probably not spoken about enough about this. I believe that the alcohol companies are very, very powerful. There's a few companies, the food manufacturers, the alcohol manufacturers, they're very, very powerful. Like, they will know some of this stuff, yet they won't want to talk about it. And they'll be found in these studies that say that alcohol, because a lot of people have alcohol, red wine specifically, because they think it's healthy. Oh yeah, but it's got a lot of antioxidants in it. I'm just like, so Mikey's favorite quote is the juice worth the squeeze? And it's like, yes, so you get some antioxidants. Yes, you get some antioxidants, but you're literally poisoning your body. So are these antioxidants, which you can get from a piece of fruit, worth the poison that you're actually putting in your body? And that's the thing, people aren't informed on this information. And I believe, again, people can call me what they want, but I believe it's intentional, because there's so much money spent on alcohol. Just think on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, or Sunday evening, everywhere in the world, how much alcohol is actually consumed. And they don't want that to stop.
And it's brilliant marketing.
Oh, fantastic.
It's brilliant marketing because what they've done is they've said that you can drink responsibly. Now, they're not telling you that if you are someone who is having, let's say, 7 drinks a week, which is what still, because of lobbyists, some governments are saying are healthy. The World Health Organization and Heart Organization has said 0 amount of alcohol is healthy. Once again, no judgment, just know what you're doing and make an informed choice.
That's I want to be very, very clear here. Like I said, there's zero judgment. Like I don't care what people do. It's people's lives. My thing is, you need to have all the information, and people don't have all the information, and they're so set in their ways, thinking, yeah, or they would tell us. No, they wouldn't tell you. You have to go and search for it yourself. You don't want to go search for it yourself. So here's an expert talking about it. Bam, here's the information, so you're not ignorant to it. If you still want to go and do it, knock yourself out. Because we all know about fast food. I still have McDonald's. Like, I know what it does to me. I'm very well aware. The difference is I know what I'm doing when I have it, and I have it so infrequently, it's not going to make that much difference to me. But I know what it does to my body. I know. I'm very well aware. I'm not saying don't have it, but I'm not going to have it every single night. And that's the difference. The difference is, like, I'm not going to go on a weekend and smash 7 Big Macs. And then, do you mean, I know people don't know the same information about alcohol as they do about your Big Macs and your fast foods and your all this sort of stuff. But it's the same sort of thing. But alcohol arguably is worse because it is an actual poison then and there, rather than the food is more of a long-term effect that you get. Sorry, we've got off on a tangent there, but yeah. So, because this is a key point you mentioned here about the drink responsibly. Can we carry on going down that pathway? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but this is a really key point.
Oh yeah, so drink responsibly. So this, we talked earlier, this chaps my ass, man. So what they've done is they have given you a substance that we are designed to become addicted to. And then they're going to slap a little label on there that says, we're not responsible if you get addicted to this. So all the blame goes on you. And as a society, what we've done is we have vilified people who don't drink responsibly, right? It was right there on the label. Can't they read? It's just a problem in the education system. Are we all illiterate? So what they've done is, so you get addicted by design, and then they say, not on me, man, not my problem. You didn't drink responsibly. Well, that's kind of impossible. It just in Alberta, Canada, one of the provinces, the government did try to put a label on the alcohol to start talking about the cancer risks. I was going to say earlier, so if you have 7 drinks a week, that's the equivalent of smoking like 7 to 15 cigarettes a day. It's the same cancer.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, when my sister got breast cancer, first thing out of the oncologist's mouth is no more alcohol. Because the alcohol breast cancer link is so strong.
Did not know that.
Yeah, well, we didn't know that either. She was a little bummed to find that out after both breasts were gone. Like, that would have been good information 20 years ago when she still had her breasts. But she didn't. So anyway, the drink responsibly. So we vilify people who are addicted. We think they're weak-willed. We think that they prefer alcohol. They choose alcohol over their families. We think that they're lazy. They're just bad people, immoral. They've got no ethics. Whereas in reality, they drank an addictive substance by design that humans get addicted to. And no surprise they got addicted. But the big alcohol companies are saying, not my fault. I wrote it on the label.
It's something very similar to this. I'm not sure what it's like in America, but when gamble responsibly, they've got sort of in the UK. So gamble responsibly says, so the slogan in the UK is, when the fun stops, stop. I'm like, when the fun stops, stop. Okay, so what do you mean? When you've lost all your money and it's now no longer fun, stop. Great. So when the damage is done, basically what you're saying is, like, so when it's no longer fun anymore because you've lost all your money and your house has been repossessed, that's when you got to stop. It's a bit like, it just baffles me. It's like, they don't give you any warning of like what to do before that. Like, what are the signs? It's like, when the fun stops, stop. What kind of, what? It makes no sense to me.
Right. And then they just aren't really talking about how our brains and bodies work, because gambling is the same effect
On the
in terms
dopamine,
of
on the dopamine.
on the dopamine as alcohol is. Now, it doesn't poison your body physically, but it
ruin
does.
your life.
It will ruin your life pretty quickly. But yes, and our bodies, that dopamine comes in and it wants more. That's a primal human drive that kept us alive.
Would you
That's
say
what you're dealing with?
Would you say nowadays? This again, I've wrote this down earlier on. I want to link back to this. I'm glad we're going down this. With dopamine nowadays, would you say that we are so bombarded? And I don't know much about dopamine, but I know a lot about insulin and all that sorts of insulin receptors. And if you keep bombarding the body with insulin, again, the insulin receptors basically don't work as effectively, leads to diabetes. Is it the same thing with dopamine? And what I mean by that is nowadays, the modern society is so designed around dopamine hits. Your fast foods, your pornography, your social media, everything is just dopamine, quick, even like Tinder, like all this stuff is just designed for dopamine. Have we got to the stage now where we have become a bit numb to the dopamine, yet we're still chasing the highs? Meaning that, I don't know the statistics says, I'm just asking out of pure curiosity. Is there been a bit of a correlation between, in the last, let's say 10 years, the consumption of alcohol going up as the social media has increased as well, because they're basically people are trying to search for this dopamine elsewhere? Like, am I making sense of what I'm trying to say here?
You are, and because I don't have a study to back up an answer, I'm going to really hesitate to answer that. But I am going to say that what you're describing is, it's actually a little worse than what you're describing from the perspective of our brains need to be in balance. It's like a seesaw. Mm-hmm. And so, like just with the drinking, if it goes up, it's going to come way back down on the other side. So if you are getting dopamine hits from alcohol, from porn, from video gaming, your body stops producing it. And you lose your natural joy. You no longer enjoy time with your children. You no longer enjoy a hike with a friend because your body doesn't produce it anymore. One of the most uncomfortable times when you go on a dopamine diet is when you're not giving your body these huge dopamine hits and your body hasn't started making it naturally again. And that's that first couple of weeks that are really uncomfortable.
I want to talk in a second about dopamine diet, but again, for my audience, my personal experience to myself, I noticed recently, I heard someone talk about, so I take ice baths. I love ice baths. I like to swear by them. But I hadn't taken one for a while. And I'd noticed, it's really interesting you described that there. It kind of hit me quite hard about how you get no joy out of stuff. So I'd noticed recently that I wasn't getting much joy out of certain things. I was just very kind of neutral. Even in my life's amazing, things going really, really well. I then, someone, again, this was so fast about the word dopamine because I've done quite a bit of research into this recently. And I basically heard that from the ice bath, you get the same dopamine hit as you do from cocaine. But obviously, it's not addictive and your body's producing it naturally. So my thought process, basically someone said, if you're struggling with mental health, this whole thing was, if you're struggling with your mental health, this guy had been on antidepressants for years. He'd come off and basically said that going to ice bath, cold plunges, cold exposure had basically changed his life. He said it's better than any antidepressant he's ever been on. So I basically started going into them again. I've noticed a massive difference already just in my general overall mood. And again, so I didn't know, talk about dopamine diet, and it's really interesting you said this, because I'm actually giving my body an opportunity to produce its own natural dopamine. I'm not craving it from elsewhere. Even my morning coffee, which is bizarre because this is like, I think I get a dopamine hit off my morning coffee. But after I've been in the ice bath, I don't actually crave my morning coffee. I choose to have one because I want it, but I don't go out my way to be like, I need my coffee. There's a big difference. It's bizarre. So it's a very, very, and it sounds like I'm making it, but genuinely, the feeling within my body every morning when I wake up is I need coffee. It now has been, sit down in my office, I do some work, I'm like, oh, I fancy a coffee. I genuinely like the taste of coffee. And if it was decaf, I'd have a decaf. So can we just talk about this dopamine diet thing? Because that's just for my audience. I just want to share that. To be like, what you're talking about here is, I'm really resonating with this. And when you mentioned that stuff there about feeling numb, and that has been me recently. And I was going to do a podcast on pornography and addiction, because that's something I had to overcome last year. And I think it's a real prevalent thing for guys, especially, and women as well. So you've hit on a few key things that are close to my heart here. So can we talk about this dopamine diet? I know we're kind of going a bit off topic here, but I think it's really, really relevant. Like, so let's say people are feeling a bit numb. Let's say people are turning to alcohol and they're stuck in that bit of a trap. How can we kind of reset ourselves? What's kind of stuff that they can do? Because people might be listening to this thinking, oh my God, like I do have a glass of wine a night. They're going to start freaking themselves out. Am I numbing my dopamine? What would be the first thing that people can do to kind of go on this little bit of a dopamine detox?
Oh, wow. That is a big question. I think that you cannot selectively numb. Mm-hmm. So when you're using something like alcohol, you are numbing everything. You're not just numbing the bad parts. So for people who are having a nightly drink, they think they're doing it to de-stress. Like everybody knows when you come home from work, you have a glass of wine, or, my parents came home and had a scotch on the rocks. And that's what you do after work to unwind. Unfortunately, once again, you're getting back to you're borrowing that relaxation from a loan shark, because you're having that 20-minute relaxation time, and then you've just dumped cortisol and adrenaline into your system. And if you have one glass of wine a week, your cortisol levels are raised for the rest of the week. And I'm bringing up the cortisol because when we have a craving, if that itch, we want something, that part of that is cortisol. It's niggling you. Oh, give me this, give me this, give me this. I want it, I want it, I want it. Because it wants its dopamine hit. So you can, because remember, we need, dopamine is what kept us alive when we lived in caves and worried about saber-toothed tigers. So when you go on a dopamine diet, it's so healthy. You're giving your body a chance to reset, because it will make it naturally. And then you're going to find out things that seemed boring before suddenly bring you joy again. I have so many clients who talk about how they used to need to drink at their kids' birthday parties because it was so boring. Well, it's because they couldn't get dopamine without alcohol at that point. They needed it from an external source. So it really tracks when you're talking about you're out of your ice bath, you're not in a cortisol state. So that really tracks. And dopamine diets are fabulous because they give us a chance to heal.
We say social media is part of that as well, like coming off social media. Is that a big part of it?
Oh, sure. It's the same thing. And it's designed. I'm as bad as the next one. I'm the exact age group that's still on the last vestiges of Facebook right here with my, grade school friends. We still hang out on Facebook together. This is it. Yeah, I was noticing that yesterday that, wow, I'm just spending too much time there and I'm not enjoying it. There's
a book called The Chaos Machine. Have you read that?
No.
It talks about how social media is designed for that to keep you hooked in. It's called I think you might enjoy it. The Chaos Machine. Like it talks about how you're designed to be hooked into it, and you're just there. Oh, I'm just going to go for 5 minutes, and 30 minutes later you're still there. And it's like, and the thing for me is, it's like the biggest power that we have is our attention, our energy. Our energy is our currency. Like that is the most powerful thing we have is our thoughts. Thoughts are energy. And if we're sat there scrolling, we're giving our attention, our energy to this external thing, which means we then cannot be focusing on our life. So how can your relationship with your kids get better? How can your relationship with your partner get better? How can your relationship with yourself get better if you're giving all of your energy to this external thing, which is your social media, your phone, your tablet, whatever it is? And people don't seem to think about that. Like energy is it's a finite thing. Like if you were just draining your battery on a useless app in the background, how are you going to have battery to use the maps to get you home? People don't think about this stuff. And it's like, once you actually start to realize and like almost unplug yourself from the matrix a little bit, it's like, This is why you're feeling empty. This is why you're feeling disconnected from your partner. This is why you feel like your kids don't love you. It's because you are just living in this alternate reality where you're numbing your pains from alcohol and then you're just drowning yourself on social media, trying to get dopamine.
Right. And what we don't realize is we use these giant dopamine hits to solve our problems, and we lose not only our natural ability to be in balance with our neurotransmitters and our hormones, we lose our ability to solve problems because I don't learn how to use gratitude and meditation and exercise to de-stress if all I have to do is take a drink. And what I find with my clients, by the way, are people who have alcohol use disorder, and I coach them to become alcohol free. So I find with my clients, one of the first jobs is to learn some skills that you have either let get, rusty, or you never had. So, I come from trauma, so I had to learn how to navigate the world from that and find my own joy. And what I love is for people to understand that it's that these dopamine things, it's the alcohol, it's the porn, it's all of these things that are stealing your joy. And what you need is skills, and anybody can get them.
And it feels good for yourself as well. Like, self-esteem. You talk about like when you're learning something new, it feels good. Like you suck at it at first, but just think about anyone when you've learned something new. Like you suck at it at first, but actually when you master it, you feel amazing. Like when you've actually learned it, wow, I can do this now. You feel really, really good. Yeah.
And joy is a skill.
Ooh, talk to me about that. Joy is a skill.
Yeah, there's courses on happiness. You can take Yale has the best. I'll give it to you so you can put it in the notes. It's the best course on happiness, where you literally understand what makes people happy and what makes people unhappy. It's a skill. Anyone can learn it. You don't need to use these other outside things. What you need is a skill. And that's one of the first things I work with my clients on is let's get some joy back in your life.
That is a big thing. Joy and happiness. I say to people, like, people want to be happy.
Yeah.
But if you say to people, what does happiness mean to you? They pause and they don't have an answer. So I'm like, wait a minute, you want to be happy, yet you can't define what happiness is to you. So how are you ever going to get there? How are you ever going to know you're there? How do you know that you're searching for this thing? You don't know what you're searching for. Surely you've got to have a definition of like, well, what does happiness mean to me? Like, happiness is to me, this isn't me, I'm just using an example. It could be spending time with my family, my friends, having enough money in my bank account that I don't have to worry, I can take a holiday each year. Cool, that's happiness to you. Cool. But it's individual. Like my version of my happiness and your happiness. Like I'm happy when I go and watch my soccer team play, Aston Villa, like football team. But that's not going to make you happy. You may not even like soccer. You might not even like Aston Villa. So what makes me happy is completely different to you. But you've got to ask yourself the question, and people don't ask themselves the question, what does happiness actually mean to me? Or even again, let's go down to a relationship point of view. What does a good, happy relationship mean to me? If you can't then define that, how can you then define it with your partner? How can you then actually create this happy relationship? And this is why I love doing the podcast and having these conversations, because it's so obvious when you hear it, yet people don't hear it because no one talks about it. So people walk around struggling, as you mentioned, looking for external things, people or whatever it is, to give them this joy and happiness. And I'm like, no, you can do it yourself.
Yes. Yeah. You just need skills. And so if you're not feeling happy, and what you said is so brilliant, because what makes you happy isn't necessarily what's going to make me happy. But there are some foundational principles that in the last 20 years, neuroscience has just gone crazy. I think a lot of it has to do with the functional MRI, and that we can actually see what lights up our brains now. And they've designed studies on these things. And when they study happiness, there are some tenets of happiness that are across the board. And the easiest one, two, my favorites are gratitude and savoring. Because once again, we're fighting our biology. We were designed to always be alert for danger. Like wake up. People with anxiety have the most anxiety first thing in the morning. Because, you wake up and you're like, oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Automatic negative thinking, we call them ants. If you practice gratitude 3 minutes a day, it's not hard. We're in the morning or the evening, whenever. Take 3 minutes to say 3 things you're grateful for. And your brain will now start looking for the good.
Tag on to that, because again, this is not, I talk to my clients all the time about this. Add the feeling of gratitude while you're doing your gratitudes, because when you get the feeling with that as well, that takes it to a whole new level. So you can think about something positive and that will have an effect. But if you then actually feel the feeling of gratitude while you're thinking of the thing you're grateful for, it amplifies that feeling because you're showing the body, this is important.
Yes.
Show me more of this. And again, you're tricking your brain to its own sort of thing. Like I said, it's pre-designed to look for negatives, right? Trick it for the positives and literally just show gratitude, but get that emotion, get emotion involved in those things. It's one of the things that I do. And again, it's free. It's a free thing. That's why I don't think anyone talks about it. It's free. Like the thing I get my clients to do, read 10 pages of a book. Everyone's got a book they can read 10 pages of, non-fiction book to learn, gratitude journal, and go outside walking. All free things. And people look at this magic pill. It's like, you don't need magic pills. You don't need anything. You just need yourself.
Need skills.
Yeah, just skills. Yeah, exactly.
You just need skills. And savoring, I love, because the gratitude sort of is part of the savoring. When there's, just like what you were saying, you were talking about savoring the gratitude. But we reach a hedonic threshold. And that is to say that, look at relationships. When you first met your life partner, I live with my soulmate. I absolutely adore him. If I did not savor him 2 years into the relationship, I'd be like, who's that guy? Or as in the Yale course, the prof talks about, when you first got into Yale, you were probably so excited. Oh my God, Yale, I made it. It's a giant.
Yeah. People know what Yale is. Yeah. Yale and Harvard, we all know what they are.
Oh, got it. It's Cambridge, right?
Yeah.
But 2 years into being at Yale, you're like, Yale, not such a big deal. And that is one of the annoying features of the brain. It just reaches a threshold, and it's like what was fabulous before becomes meh. And another annoying feature of the brain is, for the people who didn't get into Yale, at the time, they probably thought their lives were over. They were crying. They were devastated. 2 years later, they're like, Yale, meh, I'm happy where I am. So savoring can really bring so much joy to your life.
Those two things you said. So those two things you said there. Again, the savoring part. I've never really heard anyone talk about savoring before. Never. No, I'm trying to think of. I've never heard anyone talk about savoring things. Like gratitude, yes, but I've not heard people talk about savoring. That's a real powerful thing that I don't think people understand. Like I said, they're like relationships. Like it's just everything you're saying now is like, yeah, it's all making put again. I was ignorant to it. You've said it. I'm like, this makes perfect sense. Again, it makes sense. I could understand it, but until someone explains it and brings it to my consciousness, I wasn't aware of it. So that makes complete sense to me. I just want to quickly loop back round back to the alcohol thing before we go down this, because I want to talk about how you help people become alcohol free. I want to go into that. But before, I just want to make sure that I've not missed anything. You said about two things earlier on. We were talking about the effects of alcohol. We went down the physical effects. Did we talk about the second part? Is it physiological? I don't think we did. Is it? I'm sure is it physical and physiological? We didn't talk about the second thing.
Right.
I just want to make sure we tie that loose end off and then we move on.
That was in relation to why at 5 p.m. that glass of wine was in my hand.
Yes,
right?
That was it. Yeah.
So this gets down to willpower. Willpower, and this is sort of going to answer your second question of how I help people. Mm-hmm. Willpower is finite. Yes. You only have so much of it.
Can I just say, I had no idea where this conversation was going today. I am having so much fun. The stuff that you are saying, I'm just sat here like, yes. It's almost like I've said to you, say all these buzzwords that I want to talk about. Talk to me. I'm just going to sit back, Tell me about, I love this. I wish more people knew this. I say this to my clients all the time. Please carry on.
So willpower is finite, but you know what isn't finite is curiosity. We got endless amounts of curiosity. So when you are using a willpower method to change a habit, you've already doomed yourself because it's going to run out. And this is why the traditional model of getting over addictions is fatally flawed because it relies on willpower. Remember when I talked about, I thought I had two choices. I would either be fighting this demon for the rest of my life and pushing against it and never having fun again because I can't hang out with those people anymore. I can't go to places that trigger me, all that stuff. That's the willpower model. Come in the study of neuroscience, BJ Fogg out of Stanford studied all of this so carefully and explains very clearly if it is positive emotion that changes our habits. So what I work with people to do is get rid of the desire to drink. Like right now, you couldn't make me drink. I was addicted. I'm not fighting it for the rest of my life. I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my life. I'm more joyful. And you couldn't pay me to drink because I don't desire it.
How'd you do that? Because people will listen to this. I've had this conversation. I was recently a guest on a podcast called Educating Idiots. And on there, it's fantastic, honestly, brilliant. And I can't remember what the conversation was, but fundamentally, we got on the topic of alcohol. And I spoke about how basically people say they can do stuff, then they won't do it, or whatever it is. Basically about alcohol. And basically said, people say they can give up alcohol, that they're in charge, they don't need alcohol. And I said, okay, cool, give it up for 3 months. And one of the guys in there was basically like, yeah, I could, but, and they started making excuses. Well, there we go. It's like, if you really don't, people will constantly say to themselves, yeah, I would love to give up alcohol, but it's my birthday, or I've got this, or they've always got excuses. So it's like, that's interesting. So again, you've kind of got that little thing there where you kind of need it. It's that desire. Like you said, that's what we need to kind of get rid of. How do you do that? Because there's so many people listening to this that genuinely would love to not have that desire or that urge. So I feel like this is like the golden nugget here. Like, how can people get rid of this desire? And I know it's not an easy, like a quick fix, but just to make people aware of this.
It is surprisingly easier than you'd think. And then once you get it, it's like so easy. And then you can apply it to everything else in your life. So the traditional model of change is, if you want to change the behavior, the first thing you do is change the behavior. Mm-hmm. And then you push against it for the rest of your life, right? And that's what fails. What the method that I use, and it's from Annie Grace, This Naked Mind, and it's certified in her program. What we're suggesting is you get knowledge first. Because if you stop and think about it, you're a coach, I'm sure, preach this 24/7. Our superpower is in our thoughts, right? So if, let's say, I hear it's the middle of the night and I hear tons of noise in the kitchen. If I think that a bear has broken in, yes, there are bears in my neighborhood, and yes, they're breaking into houses, so this could happen. If I think there's a bear in there, I am going to be scared to death. So the thought, bear in kitchen, created an emotion, right? If I think it's Ruprecht, the scoundrel cat, mad because his food dish is empty and he's fat and he needs to stop eating too much, but now he's going to yell and wake me up, that's going to create an entirely different emotion. Thought. So what we do is that the gap between the fact and the emotion is where your superpower lies. And we think that emotions just happen to us. Oh, I got triggered. I had to have that drink. This is where knowledge and curiosity come into play, because list the fact, I feel stressed. and now have a think. Well, how do I want to think about that? Well, I could have a drink. Oh, you know what I just learned is that that's actually going to make my stress worse. And we go through this series of our beliefs about alcohol. And what's happening when you find that drink in your hand at 5 o'clock and you don't understand how it got there, it's because we're in dissonance if we want to stop. Our prefrontal cortex wants to stop. Our subconscious mind doesn't. And what my job is to help people get those two things in step. Mm. So we learned that, oh, alcohol doesn't help my stress. Maybe I need to learn a skill to solve that stress problem. And that can be a big jump for people. So what I suggest is they take sort of a step ladder approach instead of trying to just, jump all the way to the top of the mountain. Say, I'm open to learning more about the relationship between alcohol and stress, and I am open to trying a few things.
Mm-hmm. You've got to be open to it first. And if you're not open to it, and it doesn't matter how good the information is that you learn, if you're not open to it, and that's the biggest thing for me, what I say to people, I can't make anyone do anything.
Right.
They've got to want to actually do it for themselves. And again, it's very interesting how you describe what you do here is so similar to how I work when it comes to whatever it is I'm talking about. Because, and I say to people all the time, once you understand it, and when I say it, it's how the brain works and then how human behavior, why we do what we do, you can apply it to anything. The problem is we're not taught how to think.
Right.
Most of us aren't thinking. We're running on programming, which is coming from childhood. And again, as a child, you're watching movies, you see you grown up around you drinking alcohol, blah, blah, blah. In movies, what do you see? When the main actor, the hero, is in stress or tired or whatever it is, what does he do? Gets his whiskey, sits down, drinks his whiskey, goes to bed, wakes up, solves all the problems. So again, so what does whiskey do? It's what you do when you're feeling sad or when you're having a party. Oh, whiskey or alcohol, whatever it is. So everything, emotions. And the thing for me is I think it all comes down to, like I mentioned here, the fact versus the emotion, finding the gap. The problem is the emotions. We're not taught about emotions. We know nothing about emotions. And I basically say we are basically emotional zombies. Like we have no idea how to handle or necessarily articulate our emotions. And then our emotions are controlling us. We're not controlling our thoughts are controlling us. And it's because our emotions, we don't know, because all emotions are like a dashboard on a car. The lights are going on. Emotions are telling us that something's not quite right. And we need to go look under the hood, but we're just ignoring them. We're just completely ignoring them and then wondering why life's an absolute chaos.
Right. That's one of the skills I talk about, right? Another part of my job and your job is helping people understand their emotions. My podcast co-host and I are doing actually a little mini series on emotions. We're just recording that next week. So yes, they are key in understanding all this, because if you don't understand that there's nothing wrong with being angry, that it's just, as you said, it's just an indicator that something's off, you're just going to keep pushing that anger down and pushing it down and pushing it down. You're numbing it with alcohol. You're never, and here's something super crazy about alcohol and emotions. Our sleep, the last 2 REM cycles of our sleep, are where we process the previous day's emotions.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
And guess what you don't get if you've even had 1 glass of wine?
REM sleep.
The last 2 cycles.
Last 2, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a double whammy. Not only are you numbing any feelings that you're having, but you're not allowing your brain in its sleep cycles to process those emotions. Isn't that crazy?
I did, again, learning something new. And again, I know quite a lot about sleep, but I didn't realize the last 2 REM cycles were where the brain processed the emotions from the day before. I did not know that. Do you know what? I love podcasts like this, right, where I'm learning myself. It's like, this is why I love doing this. I didn't know that. I genuinely didn't know that either. So, because that makes a lot of sense to me. So what I say to people is, I'm very aware of my mental health, that if I have 2 bad nights sleep in a row, I notice that my mental health takes a massive decline. So actually, I'm looking at this now, I'm thinking, well, actually, if I had 2 bad nights sleep, then my body's clean up processing emotions. So is it, now I'm thinking, hey, is it chicken or the egg? is my mental health dipping, or do I just have some unprocessed emotions from a couple of days ago? It's like, so now I'm a bit more curious with it.
Ooh.
And so there we go. It's just something that popped into my head. I thought, well, actually, what is it? So I'm gonna get curious with that, because that's the thing for me that I really like. It's all about being curious. Curiosity is a real key thing, and we're curious about everyone else's business. We love to be curious and gossips about other people's business. Why not be curious about yourself?
Right.
Why not actually be curious about yourself and what's going on inside here? Because what's going on inside here is ultimately like what's shown up in your life. Like if you're not happy with the life that you're living right now, understand that you've created that, but you can change it at any time. I just want to make sure, because again, I'm very cautious of your time. I just want to just quick say summarize, but is there any other tips and tricks you could give people who want to become alcohol free? So we've covered quite a few things here. And again, obviously I want people to find out more information about you and go and work with you if they feel like they do have a problem with alcohol use disorder. But if someone's listening to this right now and they are struggling, they're like, yeah, do you know what? I do have a glass of wine each night. Every time I try and stop, there it is in my hand again. What bit of advice would you give to someone that's in that situation? So with everything, all the things we've said, either summarizing it again or giving another bit of a golden nugget that someone can actionably use today, what would it be?
I'm going to go with getting rid of the shame. And
Ooh.
it is the shame that keeps us stuck.
I can say I love you because I wrote shame at the start, and I said I want to link back to some stuff. Shame was on the list, and I've underlined it, and I didn't go back to talk about it. So again, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's like you're reading my. It's like you can see what I've got in front of me, what I've been scribbling on.
There you
As you
go.
see, I've literally been scribbling on it all the time we're talking. Like, so shame is there, and it's underlined 3 times. Thank you for bringing that back up. Absolutely brilliant. Sorry, Cara, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm going to shut up now. Talk to me about shame.
Shame is what keeps us stuck. And first of all, what I'd like to say to anybody who was in my position, who just couldn't figure out why the hell can't I stop this? What is wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. Your body is working as designed. You're not broken. You're not powerless. You just need skills. So go out and get those skills, and that you're headed for a world of joy. Once alcohol freedom is so unbelievably joyful. The shame piece is so critical, and people don't even realize. When I'll first start working with someone, they'll be like, no, I don't have any shame. I'm not feeling any shame around that. We use shame like a tool. Like when I grew up, it was, you should be ashamed of yourself. And you, I'll give you something to cry about was another good one. We feel like we have a moral obligation to feel shame. And the problem with that is it doesn't do anything. We pretend like the shame is solving the problem. Guilt and shame, man, they're just ego's way of pretending like they're doing the work when they're not doing the work. Well, I hurt someone's feelings. Well, I feel ashamed about it. Well, you haven't done anything. It doesn't feel good. It didn't help the person that you hurt, and it hasn't solved your problem. And we mistake that if we let go of shame, that means our behavior is okay. It's not. If your behavior is bad, it's still bad. By letting go of the shame, you're actually taking accountability.
Oh, yeah.
And what I love, my favorite thing to say is, it isn't your fault that you're addicted to alcohol, but it is your responsibility. And shame is a state of powerlessness. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, I need to feel shame about myself because I've been so bad. Well, there's no next step. You're powerless. You got to wait for that shame to lift for anything to happen, but you're the only one who can lift it.
So how'd you do that?
You have to recognize it isn't your fault. It is your responsibility, and that the shame, letting go of it, doesn't mean you're letting yourself off the hook. Because I think that's the mistake most people make. There's a cultural need to feel shame. And honestly, you just got to let go of it. You just got to say, I'm not going to carry that anymore. I'm going to take responsibility for my behavior. And I have seen, I'll work with someone for a couple of months and it will all get back to the shame. And the minute that shame is gone and they take their power back and they start taking responsibility for their behavior, instead of just beating themselves up about it, the shift happens.
What does taking responsibility for your behavior look like? Because again, I understand we're talking about this, but people listening to this, they may be like, okay, I want to take some responsibility, but what does that like practically? What does that look like? What does that actually mean?
That means, Brene Brown would say, that means doing the work. Mm-hmm. You got to do the work. And this isn't stuff. This work is this, gosh, coaches, we work in this so much. You know some things and you don't know other things. And the rest of it, that other 80%, you don't know that you don't know. Mm-hmm. And in this case, I'm going to tell most people, you're going to need to start with knowledge. Mm-hmm. Taking responsibility is going to start by getting knowledge about alcohol use disorder. Mm-hmm. And listening to a podcast like this and taking that next step to maybe listen to another podcast about alcohol use disorder or pick up a book like Annie Grace's This Naked Mind. Hmm. I'm writing one myself.
Is that specifically about alcohol use disorder? That the Naked Mind? Yeah, awesome. Yes. So again, I'll make sure that's linked in the show notes if anyone's interested. And when yours comes out, I'll have to get you back on. So when you finish writing that, we'll get you back on, because honestly, this hour has absolutely flown by. Genuinely, Lily, you have dropped like just absolute golden nuggets all over this podcast, and it's one of those ones where again, I'm looking forward to going back and listening to it, because I say this every now and again. This has been one of those podcasts where I wish I could pause it, actually take in what you're saying, and then write some notes. But I've had to actually stay in podcast mode and listen to what you're saying. But genuinely, you've dropped some absolutely incredible value to my audience. So I just want to say thank you very much. I genuinely, like, whenever anyone comes on and adds value like this, like I honestly, it makes my heart very happy. We said beforehand, what was the value of this episode? And it was just add value to my audience and to really raise awareness around this. And you have done that and beyond. So I want to say thank you very much. Where can people find out more information about you? So if people have listened to this and they resonate and they want to reach out, where's the best place to go to?
It's very simple, coachingwithlily.com, Lily.
And what's the name of your podcast that you've got as well?
Oh, Sober Chick Life.
Amazing. So that's you and your co-host as well, talking about,
yes.
Again, basically alcohol-free lives. And again, good podcast. Go and check that out. Lily, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it has been really fun, hasn't it? My favorite subjects.
Oh, it's flown by. I'll have to get you back on again. When you wrote that book, even before that, I'll have to get you back on again because time has absolutely flown.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Take care.